And we're going to talk about Pruvn. I have loved, in some of our side conversations, learning more about the practical applications of having a company like yours that can help really democratize the ability for people and companies and anything that we might want to take on that could potentially help our well-being and various way, shape, and form, and yet really putting our money where our mouth is and being able to see that these things work.
Right.
So I would love to hear more about Pruvn. How did it come to be? A little bit more about the details behind all that.
Well, thanks, Molly. So ultimately, this idea of gathering evidence for the wellness and longevity industry is kind of like an obvious solution.
Totally.
But I've been predicting over the last sort of 5 years or so that this is going to become a mega trend, you could say.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting is I started doing some early decentralized clinical trials with wearables and working with different wellness brands. So I kind of been testing this model for, like I said, a number of years now. And what was really amazing for us is we just sort of came out of stealth in October of 2023, although we had been working on this for almost 2 years prior. And a report just came out from McKinsey in January of 2024 that basically said consumers now are looking for clinical proven efficacy more than on the label of a product, and that's more important to them than natural and organic. Which is astounding, because if you think about it, if you go into Whole Foods or any health food store, what's the number one thing people are saying they're looking for is natural and organic, right? That's what makes people decide what to buy. But now consumers are looking on that label and they're saying, is this clinically proven to improve my health? And that's what they want to see.
And why do we think that is? Is it just because there's so much noise in the space and people that maybe have particular interests, they're sponsored by certain companies. There's kind of a trouble or problem of people being able to ascertain what's real, what's going to make the difference, what's worth investing in. Is that part of the problem that people are dealing with?
Well, I mean, if you really think about it, the amount of health and wellness products are continuing to grow.
Sure. As
right?
people are getting sicker and sicker and want solutions, sure.
Exactly. And so you have a kind of a convergence of a couple mega trends again in that way, right? So you have the growth of the industry, which is a lot more wellness and longevity products. Generally, of course, we're facing a lot of rising costs, but a lot of these products are becoming more expensive. So people are being more discerning. If I'm going to buy the thing, it better work, right? Because if I'm putting my money on this. And then the other one is to what you just said is the noise, right? Like people are starting to realize that just because the influencer promotes it on TikTok, that doesn't mean it works. So even if they like that influencer, how amazing they may be, it doesn't really speak to the clinical efficacy, doesn't speak to the science. And be quite honest, although the general public doesn't entirely understand some of the science that's required for this, they're also smart enough that they know that there should be some evidence, and they're looking for those solutions more actively now than ever. So it's really a good time, and sort of our thesis is that right now it is a $4.4 trillion wellness industry. So it's not small.
Right.
And the companies that are the most successful in that industry are predominantly driven by powerful marketing agencies or internal marketing agencies that are very good at what they do. But our belief is that's going to change in the next 5 years. And the brands that have that clinical proven efficacy can rise above. Even if you're a smaller startup today, you could rise above the big brands who control the market by being ahead on the science.
And of course, the name of your company tells the whole story.
Yes.
Our aim is to be able to, so for example, maybe you can help walk us through, we've got a supplement and we want it to be proven. We want to actually put our money where our mouth is and kind of go to work on demonstrating its effectiveness. So what would be potentially the process for a company like that?
Yeah, perfectly. And just so you know, it's Pruvn. So
yes, totally.
Just pronounced important. That way. Yeah. And so basically, so what happens is the way it works right now is companies are making what's called claims. And these are actually, there are some regulations. Although they're not regulated like FDA drugs, approved drugs or approved products, the FTC regulates claims, which is the Federal Trade Commission. And so the claim could be, say, for example, it can't be a disease claim. So as soon as you say, we improve ADHD, you've crossed the line, right? You can't say that.
Totally.
Because now you're treating a disease that's a diagnosable condition.
Yeah.
So that's why there's always that disclaimer. We do not claim to treat or manage any disease. So you can't go there. But you can say may improve mental focus, for example.
Right.
So you have a supplement, it improves mental focus. You're going around saying it improves mental focus. And typically what everybody does now is they'll say, well, here's a bunch of studies on a compound that this compound improved mental focus.
Borrow
this
that.
is in our product.
Yeah, sure.
Therefore, our product improves mental focus. Anybody who understands science, right? Correlation is not causation.
Yeah.
So just because your product has the same compound doesn't mean it works. So first off, you need to test. You need to prove the claim by providing competent and reliable scientific evidence on the final configuration of your product on humans. So we have a lot of companies that have come to us with animal trials, and we've helped them transition to human trials.
Sure.
So now we can say, okay, you improve mental focus. We know the science is there. That's great for us because now that can inform the protocol, right? So I know, okay, we need to recruit people under this context. This is where, the population will work for. These are the outcomes we could expect. But we still work with the client to kind of come up with the protocol. We design it. We do the IRB. And we're very bespoke in our approach. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. If they're really just trying to get some claim validation, you can do things that are more sort of objective based, like self-reporting. If you want to go and do decentralized trials, sort of like using the Oura rings, which I know you've done in the past, if sleep is a skill, you do sleep studies for people and see how a product improves their sleep. So you can do those, just that we would do those under an IRB. And because we've done them as a research agency, we could actually publish that data in a journal, present it at a symposium. We work with PhDs and academics at institutions, so it could be, publishable data.
Sure.
And then, of course, the top tier is what often is done in clinical research organizations, which is we bring people into the lab, we have a phlebotomist, we draw blood, we do pre and post intervention measurements, we also add in subjective surveys. So really, we have the whole, end-to-end solution for the scientific validation, but it depends on the client.
Okay, and I love that part ending with depends on the client. So are there kind of tiers of the level of engagement that a company or group might participate with you on?
I love that question because that's one of the biggest things we had to face in planning to launch the company. Is sometimes companies come into us and their founding team doesn't have a single scientist on the board.
Right.
There's not one person who understands science. And they're just
IRB what?
They just have no idea. So that's fine. If that's where you are, we can walk you through the whole thing.
Okay.
If they are in a situation where they have a science team, so sometimes companies come to us and they're founded by scientists. So they come to us, they have protocols, they have like a tremendous amount of planning pre-done. Great for us. Because they still work with us, though, even if they're a bunch of scientists, because they know they need that independent management on the study. So we bring in what's called a principal investigator, we bring in a research team, and we implement the protocol, but we do the data analytics and the analysis. We blind the study, right? So that way, because if you're the founder of the company, even if it's your protocol, if you're the one administering it, there's an obvious bias.
Totally. 100%.
So we act as that third-party research agency, and that also removes the conflict of interest, and we gather the data, and then technically they're the study sponsor, they can participate in the study, but there's certain lines that they cannot cross.
Okay, interesting. And who might this be for and might not this be for? So for instance, we talked about the concerns of the influencer that now could have this bias and what have you. Is there individuals that might come to you? Is it kind of small groups like startups? Is it corporations? Is it anywhere in between?
So right now we're in a place where we are helping some fairly early stage startups. And typically a lot of what they're doing with us is they're doing sort of what's called the claims analysis. And so we analyze their claims, we look at the planning for their where they want to get to, and we can do an analysis for them that they can use for their fundraising. So because one of the things you're looking for when you do funding is what's a allocation of funds.
Sure.
So they could say, well, we want to do a clinical study to validate the efficacy of our product, And maybe we're going to do that once we get the funding. So that's very easy for us to work with those companies, very low cost. We just do like basically a short consulting project, and then they can work with us once they've raised the funds. There's some companies that are small that but have essentially very high confidence in their product, but they've never tested in humans. And this is where most companies are. They're using that pointing to the science, right?
Yeah.
So they've never tested their actual product. So we do have low-cost pilot trials to get those companies. I talk about, and sometimes my science team makes fun of me because this isn't a scientific term, but I like to call it finding the signal. So you kind of do a pilot trial to see like, well, where is the signal on this? So again, if it improves mental focus, how does it do that?
Right, sure.
What's it moving? How do we measure it? So we have to figure that out. But we are doing really great work with, more mature brands.
Yeah.
And what we're doing for them is we become almost like an extension of their research team. So they do the internal validation, they're scientists, and everybody comes to us, basically, we already did an internal study, this is all the data, this is how we designed the protocol, we know that this is efficacious, but we need that third party, once again, to have that unbiased outcome. And if you're familiar, there's this problem in science called the replication crisis.
Sure.
Have you heard of this?
Yeah, it's an ongoing problem. In the sleep world, we'll see that ongoing for years and years of certain problems of claims and then following up with the science and then having this issue to be able to reproduce in the same way.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So, if you can actually replicate even one study today, like you're a rock star.
Right,
I mean, that's
totally.
not easy to do.
Yeah.
So if they can do the internal study and then come to us with a protocol where they think they have high confidence in, and these are for the more mature companies that already
Sure.
have the capacity to do this, and then we can replicate that, but we do it under the IRB. It's now publishable. They can also take this to the FDA if they were looking for some type of designation. And we were able to replicate that successfully. I mean, they're loving that. And so we have a lot of mature brands we're working with as well.
Great. And then does this largely does this mainly apply to products, more of a product-based approach, or does it also apply to intellectual property of having a particular curriculum by which you're taking people through?
I'm so glad you asked this because this is an area that I'm personally very interested in.
Sure.
And as we move into this new era of health optimization, I think there's going to be a lot of IP that's developed around protocol design, right? So it's not just going to be compounds, right? And often people think, well, this is for supplement companies, but no, it's for devices, it's for digital therapeutics, it's for protocols. Because if you are even a physician practice, or maybe you own a number of clinics and you've developed your own proprietary way of what we would call in the biohacking world stacking, solutions, and you want to prove how that works, right? And that's your protocol, then that's also very useful.
Oh, 100%.
So I really would love to see, and our long-term goal is to continue to reduce the costs. Because our goal at Pruvn is to make sure that any company, regardless of size or scale, can, doesn't have the excuse that, oh, it was too expensive. Because that's really, right now, the reason not everybody does this is not because they don't want to, but because it's way too complex and it's not cost-effective for most, wellness brands. Because in the big pharma space, I mean, you're spending tens of millions of dollars to do this type of research. So for our goal is to bring this cost way down. So everybody can do it. The whole industry can prove its efficacy, and we can, better serve the consumers because they deserve to know that these products work.
Absolutely. And what type of timelines might people expect or anticipate, or is it just so dependent?
I get that question all the time, and it's a tough one because it really does depend a lot. It's a very bespoke process. But the short answer is research is not easy or fast. Research does not. The typical answer I give people is research, unfortunately, does not move at the speed of business.
Yeah.
Because I'm working with a marketing team that doesn't have any research background, they're just chomping at the bit to like get the study done and report it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we got to do this. And then even when the study's done, data analysis can take weeks. And then, when we have the first preliminary data, we may need to do the scientific write-up, and then it's got to get reviewed by another scientist. So you have to have a certain amount of patience.
Absolutely. And how about pool of participants? Is that something that's already established for you, of you're handling all of that, people that would be a part of these studies? That's all hands off for the
Typically,
company?
yes. There are certain cases where we can do what's called an open label study.
Okay.
And those typically can't be published, but they're really, really useful for like case studies, market research, product market fit, R&D with your customers.
Sure.
So we also play that role. It doesn't always have to be this very formalized, high clinical type of trial. It really depends on what their goals are. Because sometimes, the wellness industry, we're not trying to get these to treat disease, right?
Right.
We're trying to improve wellness, and we're trying to improve general health. So the rules are slightly different. So we can do open label studies. So we have some studies going right now where the participants know they're not blinded. They know
Sure.
that this is the product they're testing,
Yep.
and they're giving feedback. And at the end, you can even talk as the brand, you can even connect with those customers to do like deeper market research on what was their experience and product satisfaction, net promoter scores, like all of that sort of thing as well.
Are there any groups that you have worked with or working with now that you're particularly excited about, in that you feel as if this arena is giving them the possibility to really showcase with more oomph, or
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Well, we just finished the study with a client. They had 55 clinical trials, but they were all on animals or cell cultures.
Okay.
So they didn't have one human trial.
Right.
And the human trial, we had good expectations going in. It far exceeded any of our expectations. Like it was,
Amazing.
and that's the joy of science. We
Right.
never quite know what's going to happen.
Sure.
We're dealing with human beings. We're
Yeah.
complex systems. We don't know what's going to happen. And then one of the other things I'm really enjoying is we're starting to do a lot more in the sports science space. And so I really like this idea of, participating where we're measuring like elite performers, because that's a very hard group to move the needle on.
Sure.
Right? So, but they're also very motivated. So if you can get like a group of triathletes to get 2% better, they're like ecstatic.
Right.
And so we recruit all sorts of different populations. Anybody can participate in a study.
Yeah.
You're all welcome to join a study, and we often provide different types of incentives. You often get to test products for free. Sometimes we even send people's wearables. If you already have a wearable, that's great. But if you don't, that's fine. Sometimes we provide them. So the whole idea is we're building an ecosystem here. It's not just, a brand process. It's like we need the people to participate in the research. We need the brands that prove that they're efficacious. But then, all of us are working together with thought leaders like yourself, so that you can go when you say, hey, look, this proven study showed that
Sure.
this improved sleep. That
Yeah.
gives you confidence to go to your audience and talk about that study, present the product, and you feel, more in a state of integrity in what you're doing. And that's
Yeah.
part of what we want to provide for people like you.
Totally. And I guess speaking to integrity, if there's any concerns for people, have you seen this happen where, just like you said, you don't necessarily know what might come up in science, and if someone comes in, they go through the process, and then it's determined that maybe their product isn't as impactful as they thought it might be? Are there ways to kind of pivot and work together to reformulate, or what happens there?
That's a brilliant question.
Yeah.
You obviously understand science to even ask that question, because this is often the case that they come in and they think the product does X.
Right, sure.
And they think this is how it's working. And you sometimes find that there's a whole bunch of variables there.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the wrong audience. Maybe you think this works for men because that's your branding approach.
Yeah.
But we actually find in the study it works better for women between 40 and 50 years of age. Like that's the
Okay.
cohort that it works the best. Or maybe you think it's going to do, this very, say in sleep, maybe you think
Yeah.
it's going to affect deep sleep, but it affects sleep latency.
Yes.
Like you may even be wrong about your own
Yeah.
product, which is kind of freaks people out.
Yeah.
But again, this is what the science is for. And you also maybe want to look at dosing, timing,
Sure.
frequency of use. So this can also help you so that your product is, you can make better recommendations for the consumer on how to use your product. So the way we see it is we're also part of that R&D in that sense. So if we don't have any signal,
Yeah.
we can do very small studies where we test the thesis, we test the hypothesis
Okay.
on different groups and different contexts to really confirm. So I don't take people and say, oh, let's do a big trial.
Right. Spend all this money, time, energy, effort, and then it's sort of like, oh, can't do anything with this.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So we
Okay.
will work with people, and
That's
that's what
great.
our science. We have over 1,000 researchers that we can work with. So if they say, well, we want to work with sports science people, we have sports scientists, researchers, and professional athletes even we can recruit. If they say, well, we want to work on a women's health, like we're really big into this idea because we know not enough research on women.
Right.
So
Sure.
all of this research we're using today is predominantly on men. So, okay, let's go and do a women's health study. And so we can select different populations.
Oh, so good. And to that point, then, as far as when we're thinking about working with a company like yours, traditionally we might think that this would be wildly expensive.
Yes.
And I know you shared that part of your goal is to democratize, continue to get costs down. I wonder if you can just share a little bit more about how it is that you're able to do your best to keep the cost affordable.
Well, I mean, basically what we're doing is we're building a system so that as we scale, we can bring the costs down.
Sure.
You know, it's basically almost like what happened in the SaaS model of technology.
Sure.
That, you know, as we become sort of an R&D team for more and more medium-sized to large brands, well, honestly, be quite honest, going to be using that some way to help support the earlier stage brands, because our belief is that this model of having an external R&D team is going to basically be the way the industry moves forward.
Okay.
So we're just I think we're probably the first company to kind of figure that out, you know? So that's kind of our goal is, okay, you know, we already have these brands on board. We want to subsidize or support newer brands because as they evolve and get better, you know, and also too, a lot of these companies have large product lines.
Sure.
So it's not that so maybe we do it on their flagship product, but they may have 10 other products that they need to do testing for. And so we can grow with the brands. And so we have a number of ways to work with it. We're doing it very bespoke. So we meet the company where they are. And as I said, the long-term goal is to just really make this as accessible as possible to everyone.
And have you now established a kind of group of trusted people that you're working with in certain modalities? So meaning, do you find that considering this is in the health and longevity space, are a lot of the participants using things like wearables? I know you mentioned, you know, some of the wearables that you've worked with over in the past. Is it blood work? Is it certain things that you trend towards to validate?
Yeah, it's all of the above.
It's all of the above.
All
And
of the above. And to be
depends.
quite honest, the health and wellness and longevity audience is not the best test subjects because they're a unique cohort.
Totally.
You know, and so it's the same thing. Like if we do a test on triathletes or high performance athletes, like if you can move the needle 2%, but if you take a very sedentary population, I
Yeah.
mean, 6 out of 10 Americans have a chronic disease today.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
if you take the average person, they are rather unhealthy. And so be quite honest, like it's actually quite easy to move the needle with a lot of these solutions on that population. So you don't necessarily want the health optimizer in the study.
Right.
You know, although we do those, again, this is all part of the process
Yeah.
of, you know, designing the study, recruitment, figuring out, you know, what exactly do you want to measure? How do you want to do it? And that's all part of what we are working with the, you know, the study sponsors to do.
Beautiful. Okay, so we spoke about a lot of things.
Right.
Is there anything that you feel like we left out in this conversation of how this stands out?
I mean, really, I would just like to say that it's not as scary to do the science as people think.
Yeah.
I really, truly am 100% confident that, yes, I know it's a stretch for a lot of brands now, but if you really think about it, this is where the whole market is going.
Yeah.
The consumers are expecting it. The regulatory agencies expect it. And I'll be honest, one of my biggest concerns is because the amount of information that's coming out on social media is so bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's so bad.
So bad. Yeah.
So if we don't get this, if we don't elevate ourselves as an
Yes.
industry, my concern is that the wellness industry is going to become really diluted and no one's going to believe in it.
Yeah.
The regulatory agencies are going to clamp down.
Yes.
And we're going to lose access to a lot of these solutions. And that's going to wash out the good and the bad. And that's what that's literally the number one thing I just do not want to see happen.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point.
And so if we don't elevate ourselves,
Yeah.
right? There's people like yourself, who are influencers but are evidence-based influencers. So we want to support those people. We want to support the evidence-based brands. We want to showcase so that we can make the case. Like, look, okay, I know there's some bad actors out there,
Yeah.
but look at all of these people that are
Right.
doing it right. We have to continue.
Right.
And that, to me, is the most important thing we do right now.
Oh, I love that passion and commitment because you're right. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater just because there are certain loud kind of faces that might then have people that are listening sadly think that all of this alternative or these
Yes.
approaches for longevity and it's just kind of all fluff. So
Yeah.
instead, we can take serious researchers, thoughtfully design some of these studies, really all of these studies, and have them make a real difference for the consumer, and also being responsible as far as consumers are concerned, as they have a certain amount to spend for their health and well-being, and now they can feel more confident in their choices. So thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thank
It's
you,
so
Mollie.
important.
Appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.